I thought it was an interesting read, spectrumnews.org, and you guys can check it out. I think that the fabulous Vince Redmond is with us. I felt like I heard him come in the room. So if possible, I'd like to bring him in with us. Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an all-around great guy. You guys have seen him featured in the film Recovered. Which was many, many moons ago when Vince was just a young man. But then we get to, because we see a group of 4 kids, and he was one of the therapists when they were very young. But then we get to see you a little bit later on in your story.
He's still a young man, Shannon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely. It's all relative, right? But I'm talking about we get to see him when he was like 9. How old were you then? 19?
I was
very young.
24.
24, yeah.
25,
He's just a young pup.
Yeah. It was half of me. It was more than half of me ago. Let's put it that way.
Well, there we go.
Wow.
But think about all the experience that Vince has gained since then, and went on to become a licensed marriage and family therapist. So we count on him to join us here once a month and help us with the feelings. And Vince, everybody's having feelings this week. There's lots of feelings this week. And a lot of people have experienced through COVID loss, and even before then. It's one of the things that we heard a lot this week is kiddos who were very involved at the Ed Asner Family Center struggling, that we're seeing some behaviors. We're definitely seeing outbursts of emotion. And we thought maybe we could talk a little bit about, in general, how we explain death, how we help ourselves.
Froze.
Shannon froze. I'll pick up till we get her back, Vince.
Okay.
We
lost Shannon.
Yeah, she'll be back. Anyway, Vince, as Shannon was saying, we had a huge loss in the autism community. And most of the parents and kids in the autism community knew Ed Asner, if only by name and reputation. A lot of them knew him personally. Certainly those at the center knew him personally. He had a way with our kids and reached out to them. So many kids who knew him are deeply saddened and affected by this loss. So we wanted to kind of have you talk a bit about that and give us some pointers and ways that we can help our kids process this.
Right. And as of us, right? I mean, I know Shannon and I were texting, what was it, Sunday morning when the news came out, we're just immediate hole in our heart with the loss of Ed. I think, as Shannon was touching on earlier when we were introing this, I think one of the things we don't want to misrepresent an increase in our children's behavior as an intentional act or the treatment's not working. They might be grieving. They might be experiencing similar emotions that we are feeling. There's a loss of someone that was consistent in their life. And this, obviously, we're talking about a passing of an icon and a loved one in our world, but this could be a loss of anyone within their world as well, right? Either at the Ed Asner Center or within their home. Obviously, right now with COVID, there's been a lot of unexpected and increased deaths. But the first thing, like I said, is let's not misrepresent an increase in their behavior as something is not working or something that the children are doing it intentionally. Oftentimes they're grieving. This is how they're representing or expressing their loss. Obviously on the spectrum, there's many different levels of their abilities to express loss, but oftentimes the first thing you see is an increase in noncompliance, an increase in aggression, an increase in elopement, increase in wanting to be alone. So if you really think about it, those are all very natural and very similar symptoms that we all feel as well. We get angry, we get upset, we want to be alone. We take time off from work, right? We elope. That's our version of eloping. So being aware of that, I think, gives us a little bit more compassion, gives us a little bit more at ease that this is okay. It's okay that this child is going through this set of, this set of emotions. So we want to empathize with that. We want to be there for them. We want to possibly ease some of the demands that are being placed on them at this time, right? Knowing the background, knowing what they may be experiencing, right? Using our not only our therapeutic knowledge, but also using our empathetic knowledge as well to assist them in what they're going through, guide them what they're going through, right? But also accepting what they're going through because we're going through it as well. So the topography or the way it looks is going to be completely different from obviously the way we experience it. However, if you really look at it a little bit deeper, it's not that different. We just are able to guide it a little bit more socially appropriate than our kids. But that's okay. We can identify it. If we can help the parents identify it, we can work with that, and then we can set up ways to properly reduce some of the demands, some of the some of the demands that are being asked for them or tasks that they're doing, while giving them the opportunity to emote, giving them the opportunity to go through those emotions because they have to go through them just like you and I.
Vince, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we language death to our kids because I know for some of this, I mean, for some of our kids, this might be the first time they've heard of death, hearing about the
Right.
passing of that asthma. A lot of our kids have experienced the loss of a pet, the loss of a grandparent, and it's a very confusing topic to a lot of our kids. What are some of the ways we can put into words uh, death and passing away?
I mean, a lot of different ways. I mean, again, there's a lot of variables, right? There's religious context, there's different cultural contexts, but there's also where they are along the spectrum and understanding the permanency of death, right? So some of that is developmental. Obviously, the younger kids aren't going to understand it as much as the older kids, but it's also across the spectrum. So again, a lot of variables. So there's really no one size fits all, but there's different ways to talk about it. So talking about it as they've moved on to, if it's religious, we can use some of the religious context that the families have. If it's cultural, work with the family with their cultural beliefs, work with them on their cultural norms, and we can try to explain and work with the children to understand it. There's lots of different ways to break it down. There's some really good children's books that break it down. We can create social stories that talk about it. Again, using those constructs that are, the pillars of the family. There's ways to, and I think the other thing that just popped in my mind is it's not a one-time thing. This isn't something we sit down, we go over it and say, okay, we've covered it, we move on, right? This is going to be an ongoing discussion, an ongoing. So we're going to want to most likely use multiple modes for them to understand it. So maybe using some books, maybe using some social stories to make it a little bit more personable, working with the family on how to address it and how to continue to discuss it with their, within their family ongoing, because we're not, the clinicians are only there for a very small period of time. But also it brings that coordination and collaboration with their social norms, their religious norms, their cultural norms, so that we do it in a way that they feel comfortable doing it, and they'll be able to generalize that when we're not there. But also we want to be very respectful for their loss.
Shannon, not to hog the questions here, but I have so many events.
No, go ahead.
That's can't this oftentimes, I know when my husband passed away, this occurred, can it often bring up issues of a child's fears about their own mortality, that they're afraid, oh my God, so and so died, am I going to die? How do we deal with that?
Sure, and it also brings up the fear of mortality in the remaining parent or remaining grandparent or sibling or what have you. I think that's very natural. Again, like we had said earlier, it's actually very similar to feelings that we have. Now we'll be able to process that out. That A doesn't necessarily equal B. However, it does bring up mortality. It does bring up that we're not invincible. It does bring up that things can happen unpredictably to where we don't have control over it. So I think listening and talking, to our kids about the unpredictability of it, that this, what, whatever the cause of death was, it could be old age, it could be an accident, it could be an illness, or what have you, that we talk about all the things that were done to protect, save, assist with the loved one that passed, and then focus on the memories, focusing on the good things, focusing on what they were, and how the other sibling, parents, grandparent is safe because they're not experiencing the same thing that the loved one experienced, right? They weren't a part of the accident, or they don't have that disease or medical condition, or that they weren't they're safe and healthy, they just saw the doctor, right? Kind of easing some of those unknown anxieties that come up depending on whatever the cause of death was.
Yeah, I gotta say, Nancy, I don't know that I've ever said this to you, but it was such a privilege to get to be with you, and see the amazing job that you did parenting and dealing with those difficult moments. I
Absolutely.
watched you prep Wyatt to go in and say goodbye to his dad for the last time, and I thought, there's no book for that.
No,
And you did an
there's no script.
amazing job. And I love what Vince said about, it's not just one conversation, but you did an amazing job. And I know that, when people are dealing with this, I would send them to you, Nancy, to be
Thank
like,
you, Shannon.
the truth
Right.
of the matter is that I think that, you and Vince should write a book together about how to do this, because it's just, the thing that I always say is, I don't understand it. I don't understand death. I don't understand all the feelings that come up with it. I don't understand what to do with it. And I'm, 57 years old. What, how do we explain it to someone with limited verbal capability? But the thing that's interesting to me is, you said, Vince, that we have our ways of dealing with it and we process it. The truth of the matter is, I think a lot of times we just put it into something else. We like get busy, or we do something else or whatever. Whereas I think our kids actually go through the emotions. And if we would just sit with them and go through the emotions with them, I think they sometimes do it in a healthier way if we let them. Am I completely up a tree?
I think they do it quicker.
Oh,
We will emote. You're right. We get busy in the process. We get busy in the festivities or celebrations and procedures and all of that stuff. And then we either go back to work, or again, tending to the family and what's left, and kind of picking everybody else up, and But as soon as that goes back, we do feel the emotions, and we will go through those emotions. It might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months later, but it will happen. But I think what you're hitting on, Shannon, is very important. The kids don't have those things to distract. They don't have those things to be a part of. They emote and feel it, and they got nowhere to hide. They
yeah,
got nowhere to run. And and I think you're right. They're going to emote and feel it, and grab have those pains quicker, I think, than some of the adults do. Absolutely. I think that is a
yeah.
very good point.
Shannon,
And
I want to thank you for those words of support, but I do want to say, there was no manual for
yeah,
when my husband died 5.5
No.
years ago. And I was kind of stumbling in the dark. I did have a therapist come the day my husband passed away. He was in assisted care. And I had a therapist come work with Wyatt that day. And after his father passed, I had the therapist come to the house and talk to him. And he was affected deeply for many years. I have
Sure.
to, I'm thankful that now that time has passed, he's moved on. But for a long time, he would say, I want a new dad. And every night when he said his blessings for dinner, he would ask God for a new dad. And he would even go up to people, men, and say, will you be my new dad? So
yeah,
he had his own way of processing it. One of the
Yeah.
things that helped us was encouraging him to look at pictures of his father and
mhm,
to feel the grief.
Sure. Sure.
yeah.
And not for, again, there's kind of and I don't think anyone thinks this, but there's a little bit of this. When someone dies, they erase out of our lives, or they erase out of our memories. And I think actually that could be more harmful than helpful. And like you said, Nancy, I think it's great. Look at pictures, talk about him, go over stories, keep him alive in his memory, keep him alive as a part of his life could be very, very important, right? Now, that doesn't mean that if something happened and, and we moved on and met other people, he's still going to be a part of their lives. He's still going to be his father. He's always going to be that figure and that part of it. But you also bring up something about if someone's in hospice or someone is in assisted living, you don't have to wait until someone passes to start the grieving,
Yeah.
to start the working on it with our children, having them talk about it, having even having the loved one, if they're capable, talking about it, right? And I think sometimes everyone kind of keeps it hush hush and keeps it in corners until the the loved one passes. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And I think it's actually better to start processing it and talking about it before it happened, if that even is affordable.
Yeah, and you might have my internet went out, and you might have said this while I was gone, Vince. But what I noticed too is that, especially in our kids, that there is this, as they're beginning to understand their new reality, there is often a regression of wanting to go back to something or someone or some place that they will perseverate on because it is the last time that they felt safe and like everything was okay.
Yeah, true.
That they want to visit the place where they last were with the person. They want to watch the things that they watched when everything felt okay. um,
Mm-hmm.
what are your feelings about that, preparing the caregiver for that? Because sometimes I think that is heart wrenching for the caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
because it feels like progress was lost, or that they are perpetually, I think even honestly, Wyatt saying, I want a new dad is a little bit of that. Because
Yeah,
the last time I felt like everything was okay was when I had a mom and a dad.
yeah.
So let's get back to that, because that
Right.
felt really good. So how do caregivers deal with those when they ask those tough things or perseverate on that thing that from 5 years ago, or when they were a little kid, or a place that you can't take them? How do you deal with that, Vince?
Well, we did touch a little bit on that, but I love how you phrase this, and this kind of transitions off into some other things. Um, you bring up a very good point about a regression when all of us are faced with a traumatic or some type of significant event in our lives, right? We all tend to regress. And it goes back to, again, understanding what our children are going through is no different than what we go through. It's just looks different and might manifest itself different. But in the end, we do the same thing. We all regress when we're felt with trauma. We go back, we have to, it's our body's self-defense mechanisms to find a way for us to feel comfortable again, because we can't feel comfortable in the chaos. You can't. So you go back to a regressive state to where you did feel comfortable. And I love how you paired that with Wyatt and Reed. That's absolutely, I think, true. It wasn't that he didn't feel emotions or he was trying to replace dad, that he didn't care for dad, he just wants to replace it. It's because last time he felt comfortable with was with the dyad family, and that's where everything was kind of made sense, and that's what he's looking for again. But we can all see how quickly that can be misunderstood by adults. Like, whoa, why is that's rude, or that's not appropriate, or don't you
Well,
feel
it's
for him?
exhausting.
Right.
It's exhausting because, like, if it's something that you can't do for them and they keep asking for it, I just see, that it's hard on the caregiver. I don't want to speak for you, Nancy, but I know several other families that are going through this right now, and they're going through their grief, and then the child is, perseverating on that thing, and it's not something they can do for them.
Well, it was heartbreaking, Shannon. I would, every time he said, God, please bring me a new dad, it was like a knife in my heart. And I was thinking, what can I do for my son to,
Yeah.
help him get over this enormous loss. It was heartbreaking, and he did perseverate on it. And it was a delicate balance between acknowledging his feelings and not emphasizing them so he would get stuck.
Yeah.
And this is where, and this is a perfect example of the difference between us knowing something and feeling something, right? We, if we're not 100% sure of why he's doing what he's doing, or at least confident we know why he's asking, our emotions take us places, you know, quite often we don't want to go, right? We get angry, or we get, we get upset, or we get resentful, or we get, we misinterpret what's going on. And this is why I was emphasizing, and I think in this situation too, is if the caregivers could know ahead of time, this is why he's doing it, it helps navigate those emotions. It helps contain those emotions so that they don't go too crazy, right? So, and again, going back to what we say, there is no script, there is no playbook for this. But if we have the opportunity, to talk about this as we're doing right now, parents then, when they experience it, can understand that this is a regressive state of them trying to go back to a state of comfort. Not that they didn't love dad, or didn't love mom, didn't love grandma, or that they want to replace them with someone, that seems so callous, that seems so impersonal. It's not that at all. The kids aren't thinking that at all. It's clearly an emotive state, an autonomic state of our body trying to go back to homeostasis. We're trying to go back to what made us feel comfortable. And they only can remember certain, either situations, or, a family dynamic that made them feel comfortable, right? And so if we can think that while it's happening, right, it makes it less personal, right? It's not that he doesn't miss his grandma. It's that he was most comfortable when grandma was here, and he wants to feel comfortable again. That changes our script, right? That changes our narrative on how we interpret things. And I think that guides our emotions a lot more appropriately too.
I think that's great advice, Vince. But what do we say to them when they're asking for the thing that we can't give them? I mean, sometimes it's something we can give them, but we don't think it's like, sometimes the kids will just regress and want to play with a toy that they had
Right.
when they were younger. Right.
Or go watch Barney again. Right.
Yes, exactly that kind of thing. I have a friend that lost a loved one, and an adult, not on the spectrum, and sat and watched Friends for 3 weeks because
absolutely
Friends was on and they watched it with this person, and it was very comforting to them. But when it's something that you can't give them, what do you say to them?
You just empathize. And and again, kind of frame it the way that it is. It's saying, I miss the family the way it was too. I wish we had the family the same way it was too. Right? You empathize and just kind of frame it just as we were saying it. His comfort is coming back to the family dynamic of mom and dad, right? So using Wyatt as our example. Not that he wishes that dad was replaced, right? It's not that. It's, I know, buddy, I wish we could have this, we could have him back and have a mom and dad too, right? And just keep, we just empathize and frame it, but just that way over and over again, because obviously we can't redo that. I mean, realistically, Nancy's not going to run out and go get married again just because.
Although Nancy's a catch. Can I just say, some fabulous man, rich man, I'm putting it out there to the universe, some fabulous rich man should snap Nancy up, but he has to be super and fabulous to be worthy.
Send your resumes to autism-live.
Yes, I'm a Yenta, happy to help connect you if you know a wealthy, fabulous, compassionate, funny. He's got to be funny and like, art and things like that, and horses. Send in resumes. Anything else?
And definitely somebody that's not intimidated by autism, because I did briefly date someone a few years ago that was clearly not somebody that was that person. So
there we go.
That's the number one criteria, that they can accept my son Wyatt.
Of course. course.
I just have to
And
say too,
again,
Nancy, to digress, that dog over your shoulder has been so quiet and serene. I really thought it was a stuffed animal, and then
just sitting there.
I realized that dog is breathing. Okay.
That's Casey, our rescue dog.
Okay, it wasn't because she's a little
Hey,
bit out of focus. So that's Casey. Okay, well she's being so quiet. Any case, all right, we're almost at a time here, so we need to start to wind this up. But I think, if we all just take a breath and listen to what Vince is saying about coming from a place of empathy and understanding and not viewing when they're expressing their emotions as some otherworldly thing, that it's closer to what, if we could just let go of society and what our obligations are, I think we would be behaving much more like them. Am
yeah,
I wrong?
right, right. And sometimes I've actually, recommended to people to just go hibernate for 2 weeks and let it out and get it out. Be with some loved ones and just let it go, right? Don't go back to work. Don't plan the next this, that, or the other, or you got to contact these people and da da da, right? I mean, just let it be. Sometimes it's realistic, sometimes it's not, and I understand that. But you're right. I think for me, the word is let yourself grieve. Don't try to avoid it. It is going to happen. It's going to catch you. If it's not now, it's going to be 3 months from now.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So don't try to put it off, right? I understand we need to keep our collectives for certain things, but it's okay to grieve. It's natural. It's actually very healthy, and it's going to happen either way. If you deny it or not, it's going to catch you. So
So
I would
that's
rather people do it healthy than not healthy.
Vince,
Go ahead.
that's such an important point because it'll be 6 years in January that Reed passed away. And I have to tell you, it has been a process for me and for Wyatt. There were times in the beginning that I said to myself, how can I be such a mess? When is this going to be over? When am I going to get through it? And it's been a process for me and
Yeah.
for Wyatt too. And we have to remember that. It is something that we need to go through and we can't rush it.
There you
Absolutely.
go.
That's
Nancy,
true.
maybe like if you don't mind, what do you think has been the single best help for Wyatt? Like, is there one thing that you could point to and go, oh, that was just so helpful? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I think the single most important thing was not um, denying his memory of his father and not brushing over that. I mean, as I said, it was a fine balance between moving on and not perseverating on it and saying, it's okay, Wyatt. I miss him too. I know you miss your father. Let's go look at pictures of daddy.
Yeah.
And letting him have those feelings and letting him process them. That was the single most important thing I think I did for him, and letting him have some therapy on the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
very
think
good.
that's amazing.
Right.
I was raised in a family where we didn't have emotions. That was that was not, if you were having emotions, somebody would like stick food in your face immediately to mitigate the circumstances. And it didn't matter if you were like happy and celebrating, it would be like, let's cut the cake. Or if you were crying because something horrible had happened, it was like, here, have a piece of pie. Whatever it was, food was the thing that took, don't have an emotion, eat something instead. And as an adult, I've had to kind of deal with some of that upbringing. And there was a great episode of Frasier many years ago that was so enlightening to me. Television, bringing it home, right? But Frasier had lost his job, and he was saying to everybody, "It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. I'll do something else. I've lost my job. Don't worry about it." But then they would cut to 2 weeks later, and Frasier was a little bit plumper. And people were saying to him, you sure you're okay? Are you having feeling? No. And he's a psychologist, right? And he's like, no. What are you talking about? As he's picking up a donut and sticking it in his face. And this continues, and they keep showing until suddenly Frasier 6 months later, and he's significantly bigger. And something happens and somebody says to him, don't you think maybe you're having feelings about losing your job? And he's like, no, I'm not having feelings, as he picks food up and starts to jam it into his face. And his brother, who is also a psychologist, says, no, we're not going to eat. You're going to have your feelings. And he's like, I don't want to have the feelings. Just give me the donut. And the dad says, for God's sake, give him the donut. But his brother says, no, we're actually going to talk about this. You don't have to eat the donut. You can, and then of course, Frazier cries, gets to the end of it, and then is able to go get his job back and everything goes back to being normal. But for me as an adult watching that, I was like, oh, I think that's been my upbringing. And it was really helpful to me when I became a parent to remember that not to do that to my son, not when he's having an emotion, that, to be there, sit with him, let him cry it out, not to tell him, okay, that's enough. Let it, when he was little, saying, yes, you feel sad right now. It's okay to cry. Yes. I think we all need to do that for ourselves and for our kids.
Agreed. In about a lot of things, right? I mean, I know we're talking death, but we grieve for a lot of things. We grieve for the loss of our friends. We grieve when we weren't in school. We grieve, there's a lot of grief going on right now, and loss of some of our, our typicals, right? The ways of things. Hopefully things will continue to move in the right direction, but grief comes in different packages and it comes at different times for different things. And it's something that, again, should not be avoided. It cannot, but it should not be avoided, as well as we need to, again, embrace it, accept it, make it a part of my lights went off, part of our process as we continue to develop and grow, right? Especially right now with the pandemic, there's so much going on. Let's not overlook the amount of grief that's going on, right? And
Absolutely.
we can address that by accepting it. Yeah, it sucks that you can't go to the park and be with your friends. Let's talk about it. What do you miss about them? Who is your best friend? What can you do? Hey, let's look at what are we going to do when we can go back to the park, right? And we're starting to process and pull it out and pull it apart, get those emotions out of us, put it into, into a plan. And then when the time is right, then we're ready to go.
There we go. Thank you guys for this incredible conversation.
We're out of time, right, Shannon?
We are. We're totally out of time. But I thank you both for being here. And
I want to just give a shout out. Vanessa Ridgway said, everyone, this is great information. Thank you, Vanessa. We hope that, I know it's been illuminating for me and it's really helped me today.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.